Are you ready? This is Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David Wilcock. I'm here with Corey Godde. And for the first time ever in the history of this show, I'm going to be getting information that I am dying to know about from you in real time, on camera, stuff that's very significant for both of our lives. Because you've gotten pulled into this, and I'm obviously on this journey with you, but up until now, I have no conscious recollection of having any experiences off-planet or in the planet, even though maybe I have had them. If that is happening, I'm being blank-slated, I'm not remembering anything yet. So there's something going on here. These people are very intimately connected to us, and this information is eventually going to bridge the gap and lead to a family reunion if they can get past the idea that we're mixed blood and inferior to them. But the other thing that I just wanted to point out is they're acting as if we're not going to have such a sudden leap. But if you read the Law of One, which I've scientifically validated, it very clearly says that the 25,000-year cycles of third density, there's 3 of them, that we're at the end of all 3, that there is a very massive, sudden quantum upgrade of the human condition at the end of that cycle. They call it a quantum leap. So the idea that it's going to take generations and generations for us to grow up isn't necessarily true.
Everybody has their own belief systems, and that's one of the things that we need to put into perspective for this part of the discussion, because a lot of this information is going to be difficult for a lot of people's established belief systems. And I took time out.
Difficult.
Yes. I took time out to write an article about keeping your reality bubble permeable, just because after this meeting, because my brain has been so overwhelmed with all of this information. And it's you know, people need to sit back, buckle up your seatbelts, open up your minds a little bit. Everything that you're certain that you know, just be ready to open your mind to other possibilities.
Some people are going to believe what you're saying. Other people are just going to go right on thinking whatever they already thought is true. So you don't need to be too worried.
Okay.
But it is going to, I know you've been preparing us for this, it's going to rattle people, so
right.
I'm really interested. So let's not play around with the amulet, let's just
get into
that library. What happens next? Gonzalez is pissed.
Yes.
He can't believe
he's missing out on the library.
They've chosen you, and he doesn't get to go in himself.
Well, and and I think the library thing happened just because the priestess and I connected, and I got us onto the conversation, and things just led that way. I don't think they just said, we're going to pick Corey and send Gonzalez on his way.
So, what happens to Gonzalez? How does he end up leaving?
We leave together.
So you hear the lion, or whatever it is, the cat, roaring.
We leave, and then we go through another one of the kind of small little corridor areas, out-of-the-way corridor areas. We come out into another domed room that's kind of, I guess, a portal-type room. We're all 4 standing there. Tapping happens on the little amulets. Flash of light. And now it's just the priestess and myself, and we're now in a completely different environment to where it is white, polished stone and beautiful.
Like white marble.
Like white marble.
Were there marblings in the stone?
Yes.
Cool.
It was beautiful.
Wow. How big?
In all one piece. It was not a super large room. It was about the same size of the smaller portal rooms. And I looked straight up to see a gold bar come out of the ceiling with a hand and a crystal ball inside the hand.
Was there any other stuff like that, or was it kind of a unique distinguishing feature in the room?
There were other things like that in another part of the library.
Okay. And it's a normal human-sized hand?
No, it was smaller.
Oh, it was smaller?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a smaller, and a smaller globe. Smaller
Interesting.
hand.
Okay. What are you feeling at this point? Are you excited about it? Are you nervous? Are you...
I'm excited because I know that we're about to go talk about what we had initially started to talk about, which was the ancient aliens, the genetic programs, the meaning of life kind of stuff that we were starting to discuss, their belief systems that I was curious about.
Okay.
So this whole library complex was made of this white marble. And
when you say library, are you seeing book stacks like a library?
We do at one point.
Okay.
But when we first walk out, there's a big, largely uninhabited area of those same kind of seats, and they some of them were reclined back.
The egg-shaped thing that you sat in when you interfaced with her? Okay. And they're anti-gravity, right?
Right.
Okay.
And there were 3 levels of the library. There was the library proper that had actual shelves in it that, as we walked through it, there were scrolls sitting on kind of an angled shelf. They were just sitting there. There were, as we went along, there were tablets that were on different types of stone.
Wow.
And then some that looked like they were molded tablets that were molded out of some type of composite material that were not stone. And then as we moved, they started to look more like books. Some were bound in leather, and some were bound in hemp or something like that.
Now, if you go to the Louvre and you see the Mona Lisa or things like that, they're going to be behind glass. Was there any protective stuff around these scrolls and things, the tablets?
Not unless it was energetic.
Wow.
It looked like you could just reach and touch it.
Wow, okay.
So she was just, it was like we were walking through almost like a time capsule. It was changing, and then we started getting to an area that looked like books from 1500s, 1600s, all the way up till we got to an area that looked like books could have arrived from Amazon.com. They had the ISBN number kind of things on them that looked, yes, that were on a bookshelf.
UPS, FedEx?
Yeah, I don't know.
Who drives down there?
I don't know. But
maybe the drones, right? The Amazon drone.
Right. And I asked her, I said, are all of your books in physical form? And she said, no. She said, we keep certain books in physical form that are on subjects that we find intriguing. She said most of them are in a format that we can pull up and read and look at. And
I suppose they're not so interested in underwater basket weaving and Betty Crocker's Guide to Home Cooking.
Right. And
this is more of what kind of stuff that they're interested in.
Well, where she stopped me was at a place that had a whole bunch of books on the subject of ancient aliens.
Did you see any books that you recognized from the surface?
Yes.
Could you give some examples?
Yes. Zachariah Sitchin's books.
Really?
And some books of some authors I really can't remember their names. Eric Van Daniken.
Van Daniken? Okay.
Some other ones. And there were a lot of books in like German and other languages on the subject that were there.
Well, now, if they can get books, that would also imply they can read anything that's on the internet.
Yes. They have complete access and follow the internet very closely.
Wow. Very interesting. So this is crazy. But if they could portal you out of the room, then they could potentially be portaling these books out of a warehouse or something as well, right? They don't need FedEx to be driving down into the cavern.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I really was not looking at all the logistics of, how exactly they got the books. But
right.
Very quickly we started to talk about the ancient Sumerian culture, the ancient pre-Akkadian Sumerian language that her people spoke.
Right.
And she brought out she went and then came back with a book that was a dictionary, that was an ancient Sumerian dictionary. She says, we have one very similar. It was, she said, ours has, it's a dictionary, a complete Sumerian dictionary that has two different languages, I think Akkadian and Sumerian, or I can't exactly remember, that is a dictionary for every ancient Sumerian word, what it means. They tell us, the scribes tell us in their own words. Their book.
This is sort of similar to the Rosetta Stone, which is what allowed people to crack a lot of these ancient languages in the first place, because it was the same words in like 3 or 4 different languages.
And we've had this,
yeah,
supposedly on the surface for I don't know how long, that our mainstream scholars use.
Okay.
But her book had 3 languages. The dictionary had 3 languages, included her language. The proto or pre language.
So she brings out this dictionary. Was it an unusually large book?
It was a very large book.
Okay.
And we didn't really, she just showed it to me, and I looked at it, looked at some of the symbols, the writing. We really didn't flip around it because I didn't understand what it said anyway.
Okay.
And she began to tell me a story that made me a little uncomfortable in the beginning, about the story of the Anunnaki, the ancient Sumeria, and the current narrative that many in ufology and believers in ancient aliens subscribe to. And she went on to talk about how all of the information, and she pointed up Zecharia Sitchin's books. She said all of the information in those books is pretty much contrived. She said you cannot take those books and you cannot go into a ancient Sumerian tablet, to the tablets and texts, and do translations and get what is said in those books. And she asked me, she said, do you know what Anunnaki means? And I said, well, I've been told and I've read that it's a catch-all term that just means extraterrestrial. It could mean any group that comes from the sky. And she said the root of the word means royal seed. And I was like, okay, I can't dispute that. I can't, how do you argue or dispute that? I was like, okay, I'll just listen. And she went on to describe that there was a secret society that had put out this narrative very cleverly to make a elitist religion, to take an elitist religion from the surface and put it into the esoteric community.
Wow. This is really mind-blowing, and I feel like I got to add something here. When I went to college, I had a buddy who ended up living in a boarding house with me after I graduated, and we'll call him Antonio. It's not his real name. He was from Spain. Here's the thing I have never said before, okay? He was personal friends with Zecharia Sitchin. He told me that he talked to Zecharia in person, and Zecharia told him that he was told what to write in the books. by these Illuminati. None of it was really based on research. It was all contrived. Now, I've never shared that before, and this is blowing my mind that she's telling you the same thing. It's very interesting.
Well, she said that the writer had 3 people that were giving him the narrative to write, and that these 3 people gave him the narrative that he wrote, that was a very clever infiltration of these, I guess, Illuminati into the ufology esoteric community to make their religion or their religion. So this opened up all kinds of questions for me.
Wow.
You know, because I never would have entertained this before, because I had seen a lot of information in the glass pads that led me to believe that the ancient Sumerian text translations were not accurate, but I stayed away from it because a lot of people have made a religion out of it.
Well, and at the Conscious Life Expo a few years ago before he died, I ended up in the elevator with Zecharia Sitchin, and he was scared to death of being in the same elevator with me. He did not want to acknowledge that he knew who I was, but it was obvious that he did. He was highly uncomfortable. He didn't want to look me in the eye. In fact, he actually kind of turned his whole body towards the wall of the elevator because he didn't want to be in the... It was a weird synchronicity that we ended up, just the 2 of us, in this elevator for a ride going up, I guess, 7 stories or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
So for me, you know,
people see Zecharia Sitchin, it's like you can't question, it's like sacrosanct.
Yeah, it's like
the stone tablets.
A prophet, yeah.
Here it is, boom.
So, but I was very, you know, I was considering the source. I had a connection with her, but at the same time I wasn't sensing intuitive empath any deception. Skipping later on, over weeks, I started studying online, looking at ancient Sumerian websites for mainstream science, looking, trying to verify what she said, and I was shocked.
So you're looking at words in Sitchin's books and what he says they mean, and then looking at the actual online translations of Sumerian?
And actually storylines that just don't exist.
Wow.
And it just don't exist. And
so if that's true, and that means that we've been sold a bill of goods, if we combine what Antonio said, it's the cabal, these secret earth government syndicates, just like with the William Shakespeare plays, where they're actually leaking royal scandals from that era in the British royalty into these plays. And Shakespeare was illiterate. He could only sign his name with an X. It was actually probably Francis Bacon and a bunch of others.
Right.
Queen Elizabeth's illegitimate son. This is like the same thing again. Sitchin is just the front man for a team of writers.
This was just a little way to open up a huge conversation that just has blown my mind with her.
So this is still just the beginning?
Just the beginning.
Wow.
Because we got into it.
We got time.
We got
we'll
into
do more episodes here.
We got into which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing, because I asked her, I was like, you know, you've talked about how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, a group came into our solar system and started messing with our genetics, and your people called them a genetic farmer group. So doesn't that match what these texts are saying? How can you be the first humans on the planet? Who created you? Who genetically developed you? Were you brought here from another planet? And that opened up a whole other area. And she says, well, doesn't that get you to start asking questions? Who engineered the engineer of the engineer of the engineer? At some point, there has to be some sort of an original being that wasn't engineered genetically.
Right.
And how did they come about being? So I'm sitting here, my mind's just, my grapes just going,
Well, okay, but a couple basics. Sitchin's saying Anunnaki were extraterrestrials, came to Earth, mining gold, and created a primitive worker called the Adamu, which becomes Adam in the Bible. True or not true according to her?
Not true according to her.
Really?
Yeah.
That whole narrative.
The whole narrative.
Oh. That's a big adjustment.
Yeah, it's a major adjustment that out there, don't take my word for it. There's plenty of information to go out there. I had to go and do the research for myself. There's a website, Sitchin is Wrong, that has a whole bunch of information. The person is that has the site definitely is biased in certain areas, but there's a lot of other information out by mainstream academics that are professionals on Akkadian, Sumerian,
right,
that have looked at all of these tablets, and the information, when I looked at it myself, I had to come to the conclusion that they were correct. I started to ask, what did your people first think before y'all became an advanced civilization? How did y'all come about? And she said that we believe that the earth is a sentient life form, the sun is a sentient life form, and that everything in the cosmos is a sentient life form, and that the earth, and it was a sentient life form, and that each of us are an expression or sentient life form that comes from the earth, and that we would live and die and return to the consciousness of the earth. And that's what our root belief system was when we were developing civilization. And I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then she started talking about how the solar system and the galaxy are sentient, and they are a creative, sentient life force.
Just like the law of one says, yeah.
Well, I haven't read all of that, but I told her that I've heard the term logos used. Is that an accurate term? And I'm not exactly sure the full ramifications of what the word logos mean, but I've heard that used similarly to what she was saying.
Right.
And she smiled and said, that's as good a word as any.
And that word is all over in the law of one, describing that intelligence of the cosmos, intelligence of the sun. In fact, they say the one infinite creator, the intelligence of the universe, is the logos. That there's a galactic logos, which is the mind of the galaxy that designs an evolutionary curriculum for all intelligent civilizations in the galaxy.
Well, okay, so this goes on to what she says. She's to get to the point of how life comes up and how not everything is genetically engineered by a genetic engineering race that travels all over the cosmos, creating and seeding, bipedal creatures.
Right.
She said that each solar system, each sentient galaxy and each sentient solar system have a resonant or vibratory template that derive the life form that they will create, and that depending on where the planet is in the solar system, it'll determine what type of sentient or life form it will try to create. And that throughout the many cycles on Earth, the Earth and the Sun have kept on and kept on and kept on creating sentient bipedal life forms, and that there have been many, 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 and that some of them have died off in cataclysms, and many of them had been killed off by us, the mixed race on the surface. They're so aggressive, and the ones that exist now exist in solitude in regions of the earth hiding from us.
Well, I guess if you're actually not going to read the Law of One, that the sphere beings will introduce you to people who will explain it to you.
Yeah.
Because that's all in there, and you haven't read these books yet, but that is exactly what it's saying. There's subtle differences. They don't really go into detail about previous human civilizations on Earth. But the bulk of what you just said is what the Law of One teaches, that the human form is the Logos. That it's the embodiment of the Logos, the Logos made flesh, the Word made flesh. Logos and Word are the same thing. So you look in the book of Genesis, in the beginning there was the Logos, and the Logos was God, and the Logos was with God. And in the Law of One, that seems to be implying the Logos is the mind of the cosmos and the mind of the galaxy, and they're one, but they're also distinct from each other. It's very interesting stuff.
We had a little bit more of a conversation. We were sitting at a table, at a corner of a table. She was sitting and I was sitting, having this conversation. And then after this, we finished the rest of the tour where we were done with the library level. She took me down to the second level to where people were reaching out with their minds to people on the surface and having communications with each other and group sessions. And then below that was what they called their Hall of Records.
Cool. So let's get back to this Logos thing for a moment in the short time we have remaining, because I want to point out a couple other things the Law of One said that are really interesting. First of all, they say that the sun is indistinguishable from the consciousness of the galaxy, that the sun is the Logos. Then they say that the planet Earth is a sub-Logos. And then they say that we as human beings are sub-sub-logoi, meaning that we are also, it's like the principle of a fractal where you can zoom in on it and you keep seeing the same image repeated as you go in more and more. You just zoom in and you keep seeing the same pattern. And so in the Law of One, they explain the universe is like that. That it's the same embodiment of the same cosmic mind that ultimately made everything. And that we are that mind, that any one of us has enough power within ourselves to reconstruct the entire universe. And I think we've been greatly disempowered. The degree to which we are wired into the cosmos has been very carefully occulted from us. Now, what did these people say that there was any truth to the Sumerian tablets at all? Were they the Anunnaki, in fact?
She said that the Sumerian tablets were an extremely accurate scribe history of the time and should be taken fairly literally. She said that some of the Sanskrit writings had some of the more interesting information about some of the things that happened above the earth and
so
in the
that
skies.
would be like the Hindu Vedas, the Vendida, the Mahabharata?
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
She said some of that information had a lot more. We had a conversation about ancient myths and then how the surface people, how we are with our myths. We create our current myths, we have our ancient myths, some of the myths are very historical.
Well, and you see images of Krishna, and he's got blue-tinted skin, and you're saying one of the groups that you saw down there had blue-tinted skin. Mm-hmm. So those wars that we read about in the Mahabharata and the Vimana, which it does say in the Mahabharata, they can fly right through the side of a mountain just like you saw. This could have been the same people at that time warring it out on the surface. And
the council, their group had talked about they had open conflict with these ET races in the skies that all of the Earth humanity saw through different cycles, including our current Earth, accepted Earth history cycle.
And this gets into blonde hair, blue-eyed Greek gods on Mount Olympus, which could apparently lift off the surface of the earth and disappear.
Right.
Wow. So we're going to come back next time, because obviously there's more to discuss with this. We're going to get into the rest of his experience with the tour, including, as you were saying, this very bizarre scene that you kind of alluded to in the write-up about people sitting in chairs and telepathically influencing folks on the surface, and the Hall of Records, which I have never heard you describe before, so I'm very interested. I am on the edge of my seat. That's coming up next time here on Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David Wilcock, and I thank you for watching. This is off-planet or in the planet, even though maybe I have had them. If that is happening, I'm being blank slated. I'm not remembering anything yet. So there's something going on here. These people are very intimately connected to us, and this information is eventually going to bridge the gap and lead to a family reunion if they can get past the idea that we're mixed blood and inferior to them. But the other thing that I just wanted to point out is they're acting as if we're not going to have such a sudden leap, but if you read the Law of One, which I've scientifically validated, it very clearly says that the 25,000-year cycles of third density, there's 3 of them, that we're at the end of all 3, that there is a very massive, sudden quantum upgrade of the human condition at the end of that cycle. They call it a quantum leap. So the idea that it's going to take generations and generations for us to grow up isn't necessarily true.
Everybody has their own belief systems, and that's one of the things that we need to put into perspective for this part of the discussion, because a lot of this information is going to be difficult for a lot of people's established belief systems to open your mind to other possibilities. Some
people are going to believe what you're saying. Other people are just going to go right on thinking whatever they already thought is true. So you don't need to be too worried.
Okay.
But it is going to, I know you've been preparing us for this, it's going to rattle people, so I'm really interested. So let's not play around with the amulet, let's just get into that library. What happens next? Gonzalez is pissed.
Yes.
He can't believe
he's missing out on the library.
They've chosen you, and he doesn't get to go in himself.
Well, and and I think the library thing happened and I took time out.
Difficult.
Yes. I took time out to write an article about keeping your reality bubble permeable, just because after this meeting, because my brain has been so overwhelmed with all of this information. And it's you know, people need to sit back, buckle up your seatbelts, open up your minds a little bit. Everything that you're certain that you know, just be ready to.
Are you ready? This is Cosmic Disclosure. I'm your host, David Wilcock. I'm here with Corey Godde. And for the first time ever in the history of this show, I'm going to be getting information that I am dying to know about from you in real time, on camera, stuff that's very significant for both of our lives. Because you've gotten pulled into this, and I'm obviously on this journey with you, but up until now, I have no conscious recollection of having any experience